Whoa, buddy. Put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Live around the world on the internet at michaeldukeshow.com and across the state of Alaska on this, your favorite radio station and or FM translator. Hello, my friends. How are you? Welcome to the post-weekend edition of the Michael Dukes Show, long weekend edition. It was splendid. It was splendid, man. I tell you what, it was beautiful. Good time was had by all, and I want to welcome you back to the program. Thanks for coming back in and joining us. We're back to a full week of common sense and discussion and commentary and talking points and so much more. It's all coming up for you here this week on the big radio program. Had a a lovely weekend. It has been, it's been beautiful, absolutely beautiful down here across the peninsula, and nothing but sunshine and blue skies, flowers and bees and honey and fireweed, and just a beautiful, beautiful chance to enjoy Alaska at just so many levels. So thank you for coming back to us. Had a great weekend. I had absolutely nothing, nothing planned. And I did a whole lot of that. I slept in a lot and got a chance to soak up some sunshine, had a great dinner with friends on my birthday, and just enjoyed myself. It was amazing. And I hope your weekend was as restorative as mine was, because I feel pretty darn good, with the exception of the fact that it always messes me up whenever I screw up my sleep schedule. The next thing that happens, of course, is that when I go to bed to get up and do the show on Monday, of course, then I can't fall asleep because I've messed up my sleep schedule. So here we are on 4.5 or 5 hours of sleep, because I just laying there going, man, I really should have gotten up earlier this morning. And but here we are. We're ready to go. And we've got a whiz-bang gee-whiz show for you today. Coming up in hour 2 of the big radio broadcast, it's going to be State Representative Will Stapp. Will Stapp will be joining us in hour 2 to talk with us about his vote on the veto override, why he took that vote. He's got some commentary in the ADN that we'll review. But I think more importantly, is where do we go in the future? Where do we go from here? What happens next in the state of Alaska? Because we're going to be facing some real challenges here with that, and we're going to get into that here in a few minutes. And we'll dive into some of the details on this and I'm sure Brad is going to cover this tomorrow quite in detail. I'm sure Brad will be dealing with this in detail. But we're going to be talking about where does the state go from here, because we've got some problems coming up in the upcoming session, and it just may force some of the folks to to come to the table to finally face what they've been putting off, which is there's no more road to kick the can down, I guess, is the bottom line there. So we're going to talk about that here a little bit this morning, along with some of the other headlines. And then again, Brad Keithley will give us the full details of that tomorrow. But we'll be talking about that with Will Stapp. We're going to talk a little bit about the special session, which is supposed to end tomorrow. There's a brand new ballot initiative that's coming out that I can see people are already wringing their hands over. Mary Peltola is back in the news for another potential race. Seems like she's being used as a stalking horse in many of these different races. We've got the latest from the Alaska court on the Mat-Su School District and their transgender bathroom policy. And what was the other thing? Oh, yeah. The opinion piece from Zach Fields, who is just, I mean, this guy, that's, I guess, all I'm saying. Just this guy is just, it's amazing. The wordplay and the hubris and the, I don't know, pinheadedness. I don't know. Zach Fields has got an opinion piece that got dropped last week, right before we went on our 1-day vacation there, and it's a piece. Let's just put it that way. It's a piece. You get to decide of what, but it's going to be this opinion piece is something we're going to go over here a little bit later in the show here this morning before we jump into it with Will Stapp in hour 2. Okay, let's get things rolling here. What do we got? What are we going to be diving into to begin with? Well, first let's talk about the 30-day session, the 30-day special session. What Suzanne Downing lovingly called the zombie special session, the zombies. It's supposed to end tomorrow. They're supposed to gavel out. Well, they gavelled out, not sine die, they didn't close the session, because that would have legally given the governor the ability it would have triggered the ability for him to immediately call them back into special session, and start the process all over again, start the clock all over again. So instead, they gavelled out until the 19th, which is tomorrow. And now it appears that they've got everything set up to rejoin and reconvene tomorrow in what they call a technical session. And what that is basically, it means that there's just a handful of members that will show up, just enough to form a quorum to address to make a motion, and to then hiatus themselves again until the end of the month, so that they technically will have their 30 days in, and then they can just let the session go at that point, and that'll be it. Now, this sounds a little opaque, and why? Well, because there's several things. The governor has to provide the 30-day notice for a special session, and that gives them a window. If they leave before the special session is over, he can immediately call another special session without that 30-day window. So by running the clock all the way out on this, they force him to, if he really wants to do this again, to take another 30-day window to then announce that he's going to have one. And I mean, this could just keep going on over and over and over again. So they're trying to short circuit it. Now, the governor had just had two things that he wanted to talk about during the special session. One was the creation of a Department of Agriculture, which I know that many of our conservative candidates have championed on this show. I know Kevin McCabe has talked about it. Shelley Hughes has talked about it. I can't remember if Mike Schauer talked about it or not, but some of our favorite guests have said what a great thing it would be. I am still unconvinced that another department is necessary for something like this. I mean, it's just me. It is my antithetical nature to government. But is one of the things the governor wanted to bring up and discuss. The other thing was a series of reforms to school policy that he wanted to make before giving them the rest of the money. He'd vetoed $50 million out of $180-something million increase to the base student allocation. That has now since been overridden. And so it's already back in, but they didn't want to talk about any of the policy changes, which is again been one of the things that we pointed out in this whole discussion around schools and the funding issue. Is the one thing that seems to get lost in the shuffle that nobody wants to talk about is the children and the outcomes, which is a little bit ironic for a school system. You'd think that that would be the key component, right? Well, how are the kids turning out? Your whole job is to educate children and get them ready for the big world and for college and for, career opportunities and everything else. And so the big question should be, how are the kids doing? And crickets, and when we kept pointing that out, that it was about scholastic achievement and that the state was failing. We even heard Mike Cronk last week talk about the test, and which is the scoring that we've been using for years, the NEEP scores. And now the new tact is for everybody to say, well, it's not a fair and accurate assessment because it only takes on a few students, and it's just really. Although, again, it's the same test that we've been using for years. So, in that instance, it is an apples to apples comparison. As much as they like to try and paint it as an apples to oranges comparison, it is an apples to apple comparison when it's comparing itself to itself. And when we're comparing itself to other states taking exactly the same test. And we're still, that's the whole point here. But yeah, nobody's asking the question, what's going on with the kids? What policy changes are just give us our money, shut up. And that's the thing. The governor asked for those two things to be done, the Department of Ag and policy changes for our poor school outcomes. And both issues summarily dismissed. So they're going to meet in a technical session tomorrow. They're going to gavel out until the day before the end of the session or the day of the end of the session, whatever it is. And they'll have another technical session on that day to gavel out. And so it's, whatever it is, 13 days from now, they'll gavel back out again. And then the question will be, the ball's back in the governor's court. Now, will he bring this back around? Will he try? And I doubt it. I really doubt it. The big thing, I think, in the mainstay here was to try and get the veto override done ahead of time, because I think politically it takes a lot of steam out of the room when they have already, if they waited until the first day of the regular legislative session in January, then they would have had that would have been like a momentum thing, right? Oh, look, we did this and now we can just continue on. Now that's behind them. I think the governor got whatever win out of this that he could, because even when he loses, he wins in that case, because he's taken the political momentum out of the hands of the democratically led coalition, where they could crow as they started the session, look, we overrode the governor, and now we're going to ride this to victory for the rest of the session. No, now that's going to be 4 months in the rearview mirror, right? And so they're not going to get a chance to pry that out. I don't think the governor's going to call anything else. Now, again, I was not expecting him to call this session to begin with. So, I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but I think that's how I'm reading it right now, is that the governor is going to just let it die out, and we'll be coming back to this in the next session, which is going to be even harder, folks. This next session is going to be even more difficult for a variety of reasons, but we'll get into that a little bit later, including the new report from the EIA. And it's going to be it's going to be a tough one. So we're going to talk about that. All right. We will continue here, and we will jump back into it, and we'll come back. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. We return in just a moment. Don't go anywhere. We'll be back right after this with more common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio.
If you missed the show, you can listen to it on your time with Dukes On Demand. Oh, and it's free. Like America used to be. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
Okay. There's 13 of you left here. Apparently there was an issue with Facebook where Facebook crashed or something, it looks like. And so I don't know how many of you are still with me. There's 13 of you still with me here. But we'll see. Everybody jumped over to YouTube. Everybody who's left is over on YouTube. So feel free to say hi if you're on YouTube this morning. Otherwise, we'll see folks come back in on Facebook here in just a second. So there we go. Yeah, something happened. I don't know, with Facebook. When I was ranting, right? So I came back to the screen, and it said there was a problem with Facebook. Would you like to restart your stream? Yes, I would. And so there it goes. So there you go. And somebody moved over to Rumble. So there you go. Back with you. All right. So we're back. It's back. We're back. Yeah. I don't know. Something happened with Facebook. Facebook pooped the bed. So I had to add it, stop it, and re-add it. So there you go. Rick's here. Kim's here. Chris is here. Barbara's here. So hello, you fine feathered people. How you doing? You ready to go? No, I got a doggy in the room. I always have a doggy in the room, but I've got another doggy in the room. Got a doggy. Who's that doggy in the window? Oh, look at the doggy. Oh, look at the doggy. Oh, yeah. See? Everything's better with a doggy in the morning. Everything is better with the doggy in the morning. That's what it is. Oh, yeah. She wanted to come in and get some love. Okay. All right. Fat Ray says, you're too kind to Kronk. That man lied about the opposition by saying we're calling the kids stupid. Yeah, I mean, I thought that was ridiculous, because nobody ever said that the kids were stupid. That had nothing to do with, anything. That's it's like people saying that we blame the teachers for everything. Not blaming the teachers. This is a systemic problem. This is not a individual teacher problem. This is a systemic institutional problem. And nobody ever said the kids were dumb. That's the problem, right? That's, yeah, I don't know. I like Mike, but I was not buying what he was selling during that whole interview. 100% was not buying what he was selling on that thing. So we'll see. We'll see what goes on from there. Okay. Sorry, I gotta take care of another little piece of housekeeping here that didn't get squared away. Let me get this right here and pull that down there. Okay. All right. Got it. So anyway, yeah, it was well, I mean, it wasn't even, Greg just said Kronk was a nothing burger. There was something there, but what there was not great, because it was, again, kind of more excuse-itis for what was happening in the rest of the situation. And again, saying things like we were calling the kids stupid, or somebody was calling the kids stupid, maybe not us specifically, but again, I'm not hearing that from anybody. What I'm hearing is people being worried about the process and about the policy and about the educational outcomes. That's what people are worried about. So, yeah, definitely got that one in. That is a hole in one right there. We're going to get to that. Okay. And we'll see what Will Stapp brings to the table this morning. Although Will is, he has a tendency to call it like it is, and not be afraid to say things that may ruffle some feathers. So we'll see. I'm hoping he's got some good answers here on this deal. Absolutely. All right. I think we're all caught up here. We're about ready to jump into it and get ready to go. The Michael Duke Show, Common Sense Radio.
The Michael Duke Show. Seriously humorous with a pinch of intellect. Sorry. That is humorous. Here's Michael Dukes.
Okay. And we're back. Ready to rock and roll. Ready to go. All right. So we got some other stories here that I want to get to, but I did want to, before I lose any, well, I'm not going to lose any sleep over it. But before I get any further on this, let's just run through real quickly this piece of opinion that Zach Fields dropped on us last, was it Thursday, I guess? We didn't get to it anyway before we got too far along. And this was before the presidential visit with Putin here in Alaska, which, I'm so glad that I didn't attempt to become a press. I was watching how the press was treated on that stuff and where they were at and what was going on. And I was just like, wow, you're better off watching that thing at home. That's all I'm saying. Anyway, this is the opinion piece that Zach Fields wrote in the ADN. Well, I guess it was published it may have been published elsewhere, but it was published in the ADN. And the headline reads, "If Donald Trump had a conscience, here's what he'd learned from Alaskans." And I'm like, wow, okay. And it starts off with a bang. Donald Trump is meeting with the world's most notorious war criminal in Anchorage this week. As a totally self-absorbed and corrupt narcissist, Trump has zero interest or capacity to learn from anyone. But if he had a conscience or curiosity, here's what he would learn from Alaskans. Okay, it's a strong start to this piece. But let me tell you where the whole thing completely went off the rails for me. He starts the next paragraph with, "Human life matters." Okay. Human life matters. Trump's most fundamental assault on American values is his relentless attack on the sanctity of life. And I'm like, wait a second. Are you trying to come out as pro-life? Because he's using a lot of the phraseology that is, what? I had to roll back. Who wrote this? Zach Fields? Okay, that's weird. The sanctity of life. And he goes on to talk about how For much of human history, neither philosophers nor governments place much, if any, value on the value of individual lives, except for the United States. But I mean, it's building on both Judeo-Christian traditions and humanist philosophers. We Americans have finally placed the value of human life at the very center of our governance. And then he goes on, and I keep going on about a life and life and life. And then what does it get down to? He's talking about tearing down the foundations of democracy and deporting people, this whole thing, the whole thing sounds like it's a pro-life screed up until a certain point. He later on in the article, he even says every kid deserves a chance. And I'm like, is this guy just hijacking all the pro-life verbiage to try and fold that and bend it back onto his screed about the power of government and how we should be all the talking points of the left? Yeah, it really is kind of an amazing article in the fact that it tries to shamelessly hijack the verbiage and kind of the cadence and the rhythm of all the discussion that circles around the pro-life movement. Human life matters. The sanctity of life. Every kid deserves a chance. All these things. Every kid deserves a chance. If individual liberty matters, it must follow that a responsible government will protect equality of opportunity for children. Okay. Does that include children in the womb? Because I'm a fan of allowing children in the womb to have the same rights as those who are outside the womb. Just saying that they deserve a chance. This whole article is just so wild and weird and just, and again, just this attack. There's no statesmanship in that article. I can tell you that for nothing. But it's an interesting read. I'm gonna post this link up in the chat room so folks can later on come back to it, and you guys can read it for yourselves. It is definitely an interesting take on something there, if for nothing else. So you guys can go out and read it and tell me what you think. I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on that situation. Which leads me over to, let's see, where else did I want to get to here? Let's talk a little bit about what else is coming up on the ballot here, as a new ballot initiative has been certified by the Lieutenant Governor and the Division of Elections. Alaska could become the next state to loosen restrictions on psychedelics. Now, there's a lot of hand-wringing going on over at Must Read Alaska about this. I think there was a piece on this on here it is right here. Yareth Rosen over at the Alaska Beacon also wrote a piece about this as well. But again, a lot of hand wringing over this. Nancy Dahlstrom certified a ballot initiative that would legalize and regulate the therapeutic and traditional use of certain natural medicines, including psilocybin mushrooms, mescaline, not the peyote, but the regular form of mescaline, DMT, which is dimethyltryptamine, and ibogaine. I don't know what ibogaine is, but it's in the psychedelic category. Supporters have now got to gather signatures to get the matter on the ballot. The measure is titled 25 ANMA, which would allow adults 21 and over to legally access, cultivate, and use these substances under a regulated framework. It would also formally protect indigenous and traditional spiritual uses. According to the National Institutes of Health, the psychological effects of psilocybin use includes hallucinations and the inability to discern fantasy from reality. Panic reactions and a psychotic-like episode can also occur. Common effects include nausea, vomiting, muscle weakness, and poor coordination. There's a lot, and of course, then they try and tie it back to the fact that Forrest Dunbar has been unsuccessful in getting legalization of the clinical use of mushrooms through the legislature. And then they compare it to the legalization of marijuana and everything else. I think this is not a bad thing, personally. Now, again, many of you probably just shouted at your radio, but I have friends who are veterans in the military who have they themselves or others, because we've had some of these conversations about PTSD and some of the other traumatic effects of war on people, and that some people have used psilocybin and other therapeutics, what many people would consider to be mind-altering therapeutics, to help them deal and overcome their PTSD and others. Now, whether this bill doesn't throw the floodgates open to recreational use. It says it's pretty specific when it talks about regulated for therapeutic and traditional use. Now, again, if somebody wants to say our tradition is, I don't know. Here's my thing. I'm a libertarian. Remember that? Remember me, the libertarian guy, the one that everybody hates because, well, this is a chance for the Republicans to hate me on this thing. I believe that whatever you want to put in your body, that's up to you, as long as you're not hurting anybody else. If you're hurting your family or you're hurting somebody else or, whatever you want to do, you want to have a drink on the weekend, I'm not going to complain. You want to, smoke some dope, whatever. I mean, you want to drop some acid. Okay. It's all on you. Just don't drive. Just don't hurt anybody else. Just don't interfere with anybody else's rights. And I'm okay with it. Right. I just don't think I want to give Big Brother, big government, any more chance to come down on anybody over any time. And again, I see a lot of hand wringing in reading between the lines on this. There's a lot of hand wringing on this, but this would give people who are looking for alternatives, especially in the issues of PTSD and mental health and issues of trauma, this could really help them. Right? I don't know if you've seen it, but they've got these new treatments out there for people with emotional distress and anxiety. They're giving them ketamine. Remember ketamine? The horse stuff that's supposed to be so bad. It's not the horse dewormer, Harold. It's the horse tranquilizer. But now it's being used as a therapeutic along with psychotherapy, to help people who have trauma and anxiety responses. So there's always something that could be used for something else, but I don't know. I just, again, let people do as long as they're not hurting anybody, let people do what they want to do. Again, as long as you're not interfering with somebody else's rights or hurting somebody else, you're not. Why is it the government's business? Well, for the public good. Well, yeah, because they've done such a bang-up job on that. I just, I don't know. Now certain psychedelics are excluded and their use is not allowed under the initiative's wording. I haven't read the actual initiative, so I don't know which ones those are. But essentially, it would all establish a natural medicine control board inside the State Department of Commerce, Community, and Economic Development, and it would establish an advisory traditional use council. So there's still some government framework there for all you government-loving folks. But to me, this is not a huge deal. I did have to laugh because on the must-read article, at the end, when they bring up the whole marijuana thing, they're like, with the legalization of marijuana cultivation and regulated sales in the state, a black market has grown. An unregulated market undercuts the retail storefront sellers. Usage of marijuana among minors has increased, and the various forms of cannabis have become more commonplace and accessible to children. I don't know about you, but I went to school here in the state of Alaska. And trust me, there was plenty of marijuana use in schools when I was a kid. I mean, if there was going to be more, then over half the student body would have to be high, because there was a big chunk of folks out there who knew all about marijuana before it was ever legalized in the state of Illinois. Again, this just seems like a little bit of pearl clutching to me. It just me. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you can tell me I'm wrong. But I mean, this is, what gets me is people who talk about how bad government is, and then the minute something like this comes along, and then they go, "Oh, we need government to crack down on this," and I'm just like, you guys are missing the whole point here, right? I mean, you're okay. It's just where I'm at. Okay, we got to go. We got more coming up. Will Stapp, hour 2 is coming up in a minute. But first, we got one more segment. Treg Taylor. Ooh, he takes a shot back on Must Read at Doug Ignall. And I get a feeling some of the other stuff. We're going to come back to that here in just a moment. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio.
What is that?
Common sense. Regularly heard on American radio. Michael Duke Show. Radio.
Okay. Okay. All right. We'll see what's going on. Michael Duke Show is about to go full Rogan. Need to ask all your guests for the next month if they've tried DMT. I haven't tried DMT. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't interested in, what is the mind expanding effects of some of these things? Microdosing. There was a whole series of articles in Reason and a video series that they did for this would have been a year and a half ago or something, where they talked about microdosing and the expansive effects on the mind, and that there's people out there who are doing that all the time as part of their medicinal routine. And I'd be lying if I said I wasn't interested to see what's the hubbub, bub, right? What's going on? Microdosing for PTSD seems promising. Yeah, no, it's an interesting thing. I didn't know Sean Ryan had some success, but I know that I have spoken to several veterans that I know that they themselves and others that they know have used microdosing and some of the other psilocybin type products to help with that. I mean, it's, again, nothing is stopping any of this stuff. Why do we need the government involved at every level on this kind of thing? It kind of blows my mind. Somebody gets liquored up on a Friday night, no big deal. Somebody takes a little puff now, no big deal. But if somebody drops a little, eats a little natural mushroom and, in the quiet seat, now it's a big deal. I mean, I don't know. Again, everybody, this is, like I said, this is where the Republicans can hate me. I think it's stupid to get the government more involved in any of this. Get them out of the way. But we'll see. Greg says, just what we need, more stoned folks to avoid. Greg, they're doing it already, man. They're doing it already. And this, again, goes back more towards the therapeutic and medicinal aspect of it, is what I'm reading. But, oh, that's why I was like, why did Fat Ray talk about my brother? Because Chris said, Michael Duke Show's about to go full Joe Rogan. And then Fat Ray said, the Joe Duke Show. And I'm like, my brother's name is Joe. So it was why are you talking about bringing my brother in here? Nobody needs more of that. All right. Better than opioids, says Kim, and maybe a way out. I'm in. I mean, it's a possibility. Yeah. All right. You do you, boo, Cindy's quoting me back to me. I love it. Fat Ray says, if it passes, let's see if it ends up being vets with PTSD or Zoomers with nose rings and green hair who get more psychotic as time passes that use it the most. You guys are acting like that this stuff is not being used right now, right? And that's the thing. That's like, again, this hand-wringing by Suzanne Downing at the end about, oh, there's more children using marijuana. Do you think that they weren't using marijuana? I mean, I think in high school, I probably a third of the students there were using, or at least, potentially occasionally dabbling in marijuana back then. Like it was just, it's crazy, Frank says he had to self-medicate the old-fashioned way, alcohol. There was a lot of that at Lathrop too. Brian says, what? The devil's lettuce in Alaska in high school? Oh. Yeah. Okay, I'm going forward here. Lisa says, my husband, 25-year-old vet, holds a top secret clearance, so that would go out the window. Well, yeah. I mean, you have to bet, right? You also can't smoke dope if you're got a top secret clearance. So nothing really changes. It's all medicinal. Isn't it all medicinal, says Chris? Yeah, I mean, I guess to a point. There's a Joe Dukes. Why does he not have a show? That's totally a name for a radio show. Well, he was on the show with me one time. And that show will go down in infamy. That is the Cat Show. The Cat Show. You ask anybody who's been listening to this program for 20 years, they'll tell you about the Cat Show. That was the one time I had my brother on the program. I mean, you're acting like use won't go up with legalization. Oh, I'm sure it will go up. I'm sure it will go up. Maybe people who have been heretofore too afraid to give it a try. But also, how many people can benefit from it? That's the thing. I mean, we'll see. David says he smokes salmon. He doesn't smoke pot. He smokes salmon. I tried that. Way too hard to get lit. Way too hard to get lit.
Public enema number one. Oh, wait, sorry. Enemy. Public enemy number one, which makes more sense. On the other hand, he's a little bit of a pain in the Michael Duke Show.
Okay. Welcome back to the program, my friends. How are you guys doing? You ready to go? Boy, everybody in the chat room. I mean, everybody, I'm apparently, see, I was right. When you're a libertarian, everybody thinks, well, there's just, people will use more and it'll, dogs and cats living together, mass hysteria. Again, I just have to chuckle like people don't think that this stuff is going on right now because it's illegal. Just because it's illegal, it must not be going. And again, no, I'm not one that believes that if it does get passed, that the use won't go up. I'm sure use would go up if it gets legalized. But the question is, can it help people? And again, there are some studies and there is some, anecdotal information. I've spoken to people who have actually used it in microdosing to help deal with PTSD and other traumatic ailments like that, traumatic, emotional traumas. So yeah, maybe it'll go up. Maybe usage will go up. Maybe it will help more people. But again, if you think that it's the laws right now that are keeping people, wild people at bay, this is, again, it's ironic to me that the same people who have a distrust of governmental power are the first people to call for government sanctions and government control on something that they don't understand or are morally opposed to. That's the problem. And of course, there are negative consequences to anything. That's the problem with freedom. Because Fat Ray Fat Ray in the chat room just said, quote, there are no negative consequences to anything. Allow it all, man. No, there are consequences. See, that's the thing with freedom. Freedom is messy because it gives you the ability to do things in excess, right? It gives you the ability to do things that may potentially harm others. There will be bad actors that care more about their own lives, livelihood, their own whatever. There will be bad actors. But I would rather have the ability to have to deal with those bad actors and that freedom than not have the freedom to begin with. Wouldn't you? I mean, wouldn't you? I mean, that's where I'm at. I'm not saying that if you legalize something like psilocybin or something else for, even in the smallest purview of like, even in the smallest form for therapeutic uses rather than recreational uses, I'm not saying that there will be no consequences, positive or negative. There will be consequences in both, on both extremes for sure. But again, don't look to the same government that you chastise for all its overreach and everything else to try and protect you from the consequences of what somebody else may do. It's going to happen. It's, these things do work. I mean, and for every place where somebody just mentioned Amsterdam, for every place where you mentioned all the positives like Amsterdam, where everything's working out for free drugs, and, I'm sure we can show that there's a detrimental side effect to that as well. But the thing is, why do we keep going back to the government to be the ones to regulate all that stuff? Because they've done such a bang-up job with everything else around us. Yes, I'm sure that there could be negative consequences, and eventually it will equalize itself. But the ability for people who have been up until this point too afraid to try some of these things because they are in the realm of illegality, but they're desperate to try and maybe fix some of their issues with, trauma or PTSD or whatever. I mean, like I said, I have talked to veterans who have utilized it illegally because it's not legal, going out of state, going out of the country, doing it over there so they don't break the laws of this country by doing it somewhere else in an attempt to alleviate their pain and their suffering from what's going on. And it has had success. Now, not all the time, not every time. But again, what kills me, again, it's the hypocrisy that kills me. The hypocrisy of, we don't trust the government. We don't like what they're doing. Oh, wait, you want to smoke? You want to do this or chew this or do that? Oh, we should get the government in here to take care of that. Oh, okay. All right. Yeah. Right to try. Exactly, Brian. There should be the right to try. So, I mean, it is what it is. Again, you do you, boo, as long as you don't hurt anyone else, and you're not infringing on anybody else's rights or causing harm to anyone else. You do you. That's where I'm at. That's 100% where I'm at. Well, Treg Taylor has struck back. And I mean, I get the return to the Treg. Treg Taylor has struck back. He wrote an opinion piece in Must Read Alaska that, I mean, again, raises more questions than answers for me, which is exactly what happened when I read the Doug Ignell articles and we interviewed Doug on the program because I was curious about what's going on. I had reached out through channels to try and get Treg Taylor on the program to discuss it, or somebody from his, office. And I talked to some folks. And anyway, Treg Taylor instead decided to write an article. And it immediately comes out with some of the damage control name calling, which to me is never a good look right off the bat. If you're going to dispute something on its merits, you can, maybe bury that down in the article. Don't start off the first sentence of the article because it comes off as very defensive and attack. I mean, anyway, here's what it says. 2 recent columns by a progressive activist associated with the California Innocent Project grossly misrepresent not only the prosecution of former Ketchikan Police Chief Walls, but the integrity and role of the Department of Law. That's the first sentence. Just progressive activists, immediately casting. I mean, it could be true. It absolutely could be true. I don't know. Somebody else said that to me after they heard the interview with Doug Ignell. They said, he's associated with the California Innocence Project. I'm like, okay. He's a progressive. Okay. But let's talk about some of the details here. The piece goes on to talk about, it includes some quotes that from some of the testimony that occurred during the grand jury hearings, and the fact that that Chief Walls was violent, and at no point did he identify himself as law enforcement or issue a single verbal command. He ends the paragraph with, "That was not policing, it was violence." Well, he was a private citizen at the time. I mean, he was off duty. So he's, was he protecting himself? Was he protecting himself against a belligerent drunk? Was he, I don't know. Again, I had more questions when I got done with that interview with Doug Ignell. I had more questions than I had answers. And this just raises some more questions for me. He goes on to say, we recognize that Chief Walls had a long career and a history of service, but past accomplishments do not excuse present misconduct. Yeah, but they do show a pattern that if a guy is upstanding of character and done all these things and gotten all these awards and lauded by the community, it just seems out of character for what you've got going on. It comes into a question of character. I really would love to have Treg Taylor on the program to discuss this in greater detail. You can go over there and read it. It's over on Must Read right now, but it sounds like damage control, I guess is what I'm saying. It may be 100% true what he's saying, but again, I have more questions than answers at this point on that. We'll have to see what happens with this. All right, we got to go. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio. Will Stapp up next. Okay. We'll see what's going on. Sorry, I'm scrolling backwards here. I see that Will Stapp's in the green room here. We're going to check him out, check in with him here in just a second. Wait a second. Dukes, did you just say lit? Up with the lingo. Yeah, that's right. My lingo is lit. 100% true, fam. Lit. That's what it is right there. Fat Ray said, looks like Michael's dipping his toe into the engagement farming on this one. No, it's what I really believe, Fat Ray. But I mean, again, it's, if you are opposed to it, I'm not mad at you that you're opposed to it. I just don't happen to believe the same thing. Right? Again, whatever you want to do, as long as it doesn't hurt anyone else. I think I've been pretty clear on that for years. Anybody who's been listening to me for years knows that that's kind of my position. As long as you're not hurting anybody else, then I don't really, none my business. If you come in late, you have to watch The View later. Yeah, if you come in late to the show, you're going to have to watch The View. That's part of your punishment. Scrolling through here. Terry says Taylor is just trying to CYA. Well, maybe. Again, I have questions. Hope you had a great birthday weekend. I did. It was a fantastic birthday weekend. Thank you. Fantastic. Yes, Brian. Right there. There's some of my stuff right there. Don't hurt people and don't take their stuff. That's Matt Kibbe. My favorite viewpoint from Matt Kibbe. All right, let's go over to the green room here. And we'll check the audio and everything from Will, make sure that nothing got changed over the weekend, and see what's going on. Hello, my friend. How are you?
Hey, Michael. How are you?
Good.
Can you hear me?
You are super quiet. Hold on a second.
Oh,
here.
hold on. Let me. Is this better?
Try it again.
Okay. How about now?
That was me. I had something turned down. See, this is why we check it ahead of time.
All right.
I had something turned down, so we are good to go. All right, my friend. You all ready already? You just all?
Oh, I'm always ready.
You're
always ready. I get up at 4:30 and I go get my workout in, and then I love going on the Michael Duke show because now it's another workout, like a mental.
That's right. It's another workout. He's prepared. He's warmed up. He's ready to take the blows. He's ready to go to it. So, all right. Well, good. Well, I just wanted to make sure that you are up and ready, and I'll put you back in the green room here, and we'll get started here in about 2.5 minutes. Okay.
All right. Well, let me show everybody the North Pole coffee advertisement this morning.
Yeah, there you go. That's what you need. And boy, what is that, like a 29 ounce? Jeez.
Yeah. Well, don't coffee, nicotine, and hate, Michael. That's how I subsist in life. So
that's how we do it. All right. Well, hold the line here, Will. We'll be right back to you. All right. Layla says, oh man, that's a page. Philosophically, I agree with you on the therapeutic use of these chemicals, but does anyone remember the airline pilot who almost killed an entire plane of innocent people because he'd done mushrooms the day before? Our dog once got into a Manila, a sweet Labrador. She spent all night barking at the Davidson ditch. I guess she thought it was a giant metal snake. She survived, but for months she would suddenly freak out over things that this sweet animal had never growled or barked at before. That guy, that airline pilot, don't hurt other people. If you're going to be flying, don't take something a couple days before, I'm with you. Again, I understand, Layla. And the therapeutic uses specifically are what I'm interested in. I mean, I'm not interested in getting blitzed on acid or doing something like that, but the therapeutic, especially for trauma, microdosing for trauma and for PTSD, I think that's an interesting take there. But again, we'll have to see what the voters decide. We'll have to see what the voters decide in the state of Alaska and if it's the end of the world or not. Like anything, freedom can be abused, my friends. That's what makes it messy. And that's what makes it freedom. Okay. An AMA on shrooms. Maybe we need an Ask Me Anything on shrooms. Well, I don't know anything on shrooms. Maybe we should find somebody who's an expert and ask them, like I said, maybe I'll go back and take a look because again, there was a series of Reason articles about this here about a year and a half ago and a whole thing. And Nick Gillespie did an expose on it as well over at Reason talking about the therapeutic and the recreational effects of those things. Well, it's again, you do what you want to do. Brian asked earlier, what does my shirt say? What does my shirt say? Come on, this is my favorite t-shirt. You've seen this before, Brian, right? There you go. That's it. It's the classic advertisement for Dungeons and Dragons. All right, let's get to it. Here we go. Common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio. Back with more.
Whoa, buddy. Put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Oh, baby, live around the world on the internet at michaeldukeshow.com and across the state of Alaska on this, your favorite radio station, and or FM. I just looked down and my dog has knocked over my light that shines on the thing on the foot. Anyway, welcome back to the program. It's Monday. How are you over your long weekend? I mean, it may not have been a long weekend for you, but it was for me, and it was fantastic. I can't tell you how much I enjoyed it. But we're back to it, ready to go. We've got lots of good stuff to talk about, lots of discussions. Joining us in hour 2 here is Representative Will Stapp from the Interior. We're going to talk about the veto override. We're going to talk about schools. We're going to talk about the upcoming session. We're going to talk about a lot of stuff. And it should be a good time to be had by all. So buckle up, Buttercup. It's going to be a fun one. Coming up tomorrow on the program, Brad Keithley, Chris Story. We will continue those discussions as well. But let's get to it, because our guest has been waiting in the wings over the top of the hour. We don't want to waste any more time. Let's get over there right now. Representative Will Stapp joins us this morning to discuss wood ticks, lunatics, politics, and more. Hello, my friend. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing good, Michael. I'm certainly curious about the whole shroom conversation there. I don't know if that would make things better or worse down in Juneau if all the legislators.
I think those guys are already using them. That's all I'm saying. I just think this is just proof positive that they're already using them down there in Juneau for sure.
Yeah, well, with some of those ideas, you probably wouldn't be shocked if they were, I'd imagine. So.
Yeah, exactly. For those of you who are wondering what Will's talking about, there's a new citizens initiative petition. It's an initiative to get on the ballot. They've got to go collect the signatures now to make psilocybin and other psychedelics available for therapeutic and or / spiritual use. So that's what's on the agenda here. And the chat room's been yelling at me all morning because I said, you do you. That's kind of where I'm at. Anyway, Will, let's get started. You're quoted as basically saying this is not something you're happy about, that you have not celebrated the fact that you had to override the governor. And I'll be honest with you, I was cheering for you all session long, because you were one of the few that stood up there and said, great, how do we pay for it? Great, where does the money come from? Great, this is good. You were always asking that hard question of where do things happen and where does the rubber meet the road? And then we put $184 million a year in perpetuity into the budget. And the governor had vetoed a small portion of that for this year only. And yet we had to override him again without any real policy changes, et cetera, et cetera. So I wanted to give you a chance, and I know that part of this has to do with your experience with the local school board. Melissa's in the chat room. Melissa's done a lot of hard work on the school board locally. I know they're fighting it, but I don't think that alleviates a lot of the other problems. But I want to give you a chance to tell people why you voted to override the governor's veto. Give us your full take here.
Well, sure. Always a pleasure to be on, Michael. So I'm gonna kind of push back a little bit on this. So this is not a this year conversation. This conversation started 3 years ago. Right. So just so people understand that the amount of money that we budgeted for an education increase is fundamentally the same amount of money that we put in the budget in FY25 and then FY26 and now FY27. Right. So year one, my first year in the legislature, we put a $680 BSA increase in one-time money. It was vetoed down by the governor. Year two, governor vetoed the education bill. I also voted to override the governor on the education bill last year. I thought it was, in some aspects, I think it's a better bill than the one we had this year, and others not so much. Governor did not veto the funding that we put in the budget for education last year. And then this year, we went through the process again. Obviously, Democrats control both chambers. So what happened was they basically wanted to spend exponentially amount of more money as opposed to the money that we had already been budgeting for schools for a permanent increase. That bill was vetoed. That veto was sustained. And then we did a new bill with $700 BSA, so basically a slight increase in what we had given school districts for the previous 3 years through appropriation powers of the legislature. And you had some policy changes in that. Some are good. Some are, I think, structurally important, especially when you get into the issues with charter schools. And I can talk about kind of Pearl Creek. For folks who don't know, there is basically a loophole in districts with charter school applications where they can deny the charter school by just simply not hearing the application, right? So that bill basically looks to close that loophole. And then finally, there are policies in there that look to be data driven and supporting outcomes, and that's mainly due to classroom size caps. I can get in the details that people want, but there's a bit of a chicanery when it comes to this metric that school districts use called PTR. That's parent-teacher ratio. So a lot of times school districts will fudge their PTR.
Pupil-teacher ratio?
Yeah, exactly. Sorry.
Not parent, yeah.
My bad. Early in the morning, pupil-teacher ratio, right? So the school district will say, well, our PTR is 24 when their classroom size is 35, because they'll count like the librarian or the assistant principal, who's also a certified teacher, into that, right? So fundamentally, like, we understand a few things about education really well. Smaller classroom sizes lead to better outcomes. That's not surprising. A teacher can spend more time with individual students if they're in a smaller setting than a large setting, especially younger students. And other aspects of the bill, reading incentive grants and CTE funding. I mean, when you look at our workforce challenges, most of those are going to be around CTE issues. Again, most of the jobs, especially if you look at the North Slope development, Willow and Pica, and hopefully Sockeye too. And finally, my school board has done a lot of work. So I've worked with my school board for the last 3 years to look at a couple of things, right sizing the school district and looking at basically the number one area of improvement in the Fairbanks North Starborough School District is going to be on getting these correspondence school kids back into the district. There's about 3,500 kids in Fairbanks, including my own children, by the way, who are not enrolled in the district. They're not enrolled in the district because the programs offered by other correspondence schools are more competitive than the one offered by Fairbanks currently. So ideally, like, you focus on those things and you take a fundamental premise that success breeds success. So our school board president, and our board over the last 5 years has done pretty draconian cuts. We've closed 7 schools. We've cut hundreds of positions, most of the admin. There's no more art and music. Kids pay for school sports. There's no more custodians on payroll, and Fairbanks are all contracted. And, at some point, you got to tell people when they want to do hard things. All those things are unpopular, by the way. Like, nobody wants to send their kid to a school district that doesn't have art or music, and they closed a bunch of schools. So when you look at the context of the work that the folks here in Fairbanks have done, you ask them to do hard things, right? They do them, and you look to support them.
Well, let me ask you a pertinent question based on what you just said. I mean, the closures, the reductions, the privatization of the maintenance and the janitorial, et cetera, these were all predictable outcomes because the decline of enrollment, right? We knew that this is happening. It's been declining for years. It's projected to continue to decline. And I think part of the problem is, and this is not simply a Fairbanks problem, this is a statewide problem for the most part, is that the school districts are failing to account for that. When they budget, they're not budgeting for the worst case scenario, which I think anybody who does any budgeting, you budget for the worst case and all your surprises will be happy ones. If it's best case, hey, it's a windfall, right? But we know that you're going to have fewer students. We shouldn't be fighting for an ever increasing amount of money when we know that there's going to be future students. Now, Anchorage is the worst on this. They're actually still building new schools when they've got 50% capacity in some of their schools, right? Fairbanks has done a lot of hard work. You're 100% right. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't continue to try and tighten the belt and make it better. Because again, you have fewer, your whole model is built on a per student funding formula. And if you have fewer students, you're going to have less money, and you have to acknowledge that and plan for that. And that's the problem, is that most of these school districts haven't done that. And Fairbanks didn't do that up until recently. Now they're starting to have to try and deal with it.
Yeah. So, okay. So it kind of hit the nail on the head, right? So remember, this is a political process. Ideally, Michael, when you see declining enrollment, which has been going on for a long time, people in charge of the budget are going to say, well, we should start this kind of consolidation phase. We should shift gears. And you do that over a multi-year process, right? I often compare this to the state's operating budget, okay? The current executive has been in office for 7 years. If you made a 1.5% cut to the budget every year for 7 years, you end up with real money after 7 years, okay? So kind of what happens in, the politics of people in charge, like people don't want to say, we're not going to have art and music, or I'm going to close your kid's elementary school. So they do this proverbial can kicking, which we're all familiar with on this show, down the road, until ultimately the responsibility to do all the unpopular things falls on like one person, okay? So in this case, it fell on school board president Melissa Burnett, who I know is in the chat. She basically had to go in and do all the unpopular things all at once. And by the way, the school district in Fairbanks, in spite of this funding increase, right, on a permanent basis, is still going to have to continue this process of reductions and ideally target an investment in growth potential areas. Okay, so where are our growth multipliers in Fairbanks? Behind me, if you can see on the screen, that's Raven's big CTE program. So correspondent school is the biggest type of uptick in Fairbanks North Star Borough enrollment. And I fundamentally believe that our district, because of the resources, because of the brick and mortar structures, because of the busing, and really the automotive and stuff like that when it comes to CTE, has huge advantages. And really the focus of the board should be trying to recapture a lot of those kids to enroll back into the district, because that would solve a bunch of their financial problems if they did. All right.
Well, yes. But again, what you're trying to say is that, again, we have a competitive environment right now. You said it yourself. The charter schools and the allotment schools that are in the community there in Fairbanks are more competitive. They're offering more and better solutions to parents than the current school board. And you're saying if we could just force all those kids back into the school district, we'd have solved their financial problems. But the problem is it's not competitive. That's you said it yourself. It's not competitive.
Yeah. So hold on. So I didn't say force, right? Competition is a good thing, Michael. So like, again, the more competition you have, it's going to lead to better education outcomes. So I'm a big believer in correspondence school system. I think the outcomes, obviously you can look to improve anything else like that, but the more competition you have, the better education outcome, because districts are competing with parents. And again, dollars, right? In Alaska, the BSA, or rather it's called the foundation formula. BSA is just a portion. Foundation formula is tied to student enrollment. It gets a little wonky with budgeting. I know you mentioned this earlier because of the ADM count in October, as opposed to the beginning of the school year, or using the count at the end of the school year in terms of a hard number and assessing that for your budget. But ideally, like the more competition you have in that space, the better outcomes you're going to get. And honestly, this is why last year when I talked about SB 140, the most important thing in that bill to me, which is why I voted override, was increasing that correspondence multiplier from 9 to 1. And the reason I thought that was the most important aspect of the bill is because I don't think you have to be a genius to figure out that as technology and especially AI continues to develop, you're just going to see a continued shift from kids enrolled in a brick and mortar school into correspondence type delivery.
Right.
So that's
No,
a very difficult thing.
Yeah, and you're right. My use of the word force was probably not the correct one, but to draw them back in. If it's going to make the schools more competitive and more in line with what parents want, then yes, I think that could be a good thing, and they'll have a better choice. And I think that's what the governor was trying to push for, especially in the charter school authorizations and some of those other things, where we had an opportunity where they could, where parents, because we keep complaining about how there are students out there where the parents just don't care. But charter schools are like the exact opposite of that, right? I mean, they are aside from homeschooling, it is the next best thing to homeschooling because the parents are directly involved in every aspect of it. Why can't we get authorizers outside of the districts, make it a school, the state deed or the Board of Education or some other entity that can authorize those, giving people even more choices and more competition?
Yeah, so this is a good thing to puzzle through. All right, so
well, and I hate to do this to you, but hold the thought. Let's pick this back up.
Yeah, no worries.
I realized I'm a minute late here, so we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to continue with Representative Will Stapp, and we'll be back. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. We're talking about education and the override. We'll return in just a moment. Don't go anywhere.
Running on 100% pure beard power. Oh, also some coffee. We dip our beard in coffee.
Ha, nice beard.
The Michael Duke Show.
Okay, Will Stapp is our guest. We are continuing on here. Will, I mean, you mentioned your kids are even in the homeschool system.
Yeah.
My kids, we homeschooled them through their entire adult or through their entire school experience and everything else. And I mean, I think that's great. And, we saw the pandemic really opened up, I think, a lot of parents' eyes to realizing that they could do better. That's when we really saw this jump, because they were dissatisfied with what the districts across the state and across the country, quite honestly, were doing. And they discovered that schooling their own kids was not as hard as many people thought, especially, like you said, with technology, the improvements of technology, not even AI, just the fact that you could go online and you could find courses and videos and TED Talks and Khan Academy and all these other things that you could do. People discovered it wasn't as hard to educate their children as they kept being told. Oh, you couldn't possibly do it yourself. And that's what they discovered, right?
Yeah, I think, it's pretty obvious to me that as time keeps going by, someone is going to develop a really sleek electronic kind of delivery for education in the future. The resources are just too overwhelming out nowadays, Michael, to not be able to productively educate a kid from home. Mainly because of the things you mentioned, Khan Academy kids. It is kind of amazing to me. I don't think I'm that old. I'm 37, right? And my kids have access to just a nonstop amount of education material. One of my oldest daughter's favorite things to do is to watch YouTuber Mark Rober for engineering and science stuff. And ultimately, market pressure and just choice is going to kind of drive us away from this standard traditional model. But you do got to remember, you'll probably never get rid of a brick and mortar school. And the reason is because if you want to have a public education system, you got to incorporate, what do you do about those parents who are not involved, right? So from my perspective, and I'll talk about this when we go back online or on the air too. I didn't have parents, so my mom killed herself when she was 7 and my dad wasn't around, right? So I had to go to a public school because I didn't have any support structure as a child that would drive me to charter school or put me in a magnet school or something like that, right? So the question you got to ask is what do you do with those kids, and what kind of opportunities do you want to provide those kids to have in kind of an environment that the school might be the only environment they have. And obviously, I'm a big believer in parental responsibility. But I mean, like, the question is, like, what do you do with those kids, right? I mean, they're not going to be in a charter, even though charter would be better for them,
No, I understand that. No, I don't think we'll ever lose, like you said, the brick and mortar, but I think it's going to have to adapt. I think, it's going to have to adapt and change because the technology is working beyond, is working beyond where it's at right now. Of course, it's got to adapt and it's got to change. And it's reticent to do so right now. And I think a lot of that is because you've got things like the NEA and the Federation of Teachers and the school board associations, and they want things to remain kind of static and as they are, right? They like the game the way it is. They don't want to change. And that's part of the problem here is that we've got these outside influences that are pushing on this kind of stuff.
Yeah, so I mean, I quote Reagan here. Reagan said, "Trust but verify." Michael, like, one of the things I think people need to understand is the legislature, when you're kind of down there in Juneau making decisions, is you should operate under the expectations that certain interest groups are exactly what they are, interest groups, right? Like, if the president of NEA wants an unlimited amount of money to give to NEA members, okay, so it's like base fact number one, right? School board association, they want unlimited amount of money to give the school boards, principals, et cetera, right? And it's really no different from any other interest groups, industry doesn't want to pay any taxes, for example, right? I mean, these are all just kind of natural positions for these folks to hold. So, you got to sit down and you got to determine kind of what is factual and what is not. And I have a saying that numbers don't lie, but people do. So
all the time. All right. We're 12 seconds out. We're going to rejoin. We're going to pick up on the whole COVID leading to the exodus from the schools on the way out. You had a thought on that. We're going to continue there. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Please like and share, subscribe, ring the bell. Let's get to it. Here we go.
The Michael Duke Show. Not your daddy. Wait, sorry. Not your daddy? Ooh, not your daddy's talk radio. Huh. Whew. I was scared for a second. Thought we were going down. Here's Michael Dukes and the show.
Okay, we're back with Will Stapp, representative from up in the interior. We're talking about the governor's veto, the override, school funding and choice. And I made a comment before we went to break about how COVID, I think, showed a lot of parents that they could take control of their kids' education a lot more, and it's forcing more competition into schools. And Will, you were gonna comment on that as we go through.
I think the question was charter school authorizers. That's what I wrote down. Right.
Okay.
So I think that when you look at other states, they have different charter school authorizers. I don't have a fundamental problem with that. I mean, I supported that policy. I think you do got to puzzle through some of the potential issues based on how you do funding and how you view local control. I would also say you got to think about the long-term implications of a policy, right? So the argument that was made is the State Board of Education should be able to charter a school in a local district. And basically the local district, especially if they're paying required local contribution, is going to kind of fund that, okay? So the issues with that policy of circumventing a local school board are, there's a couple of potentially unintended consequences, and who controls the state board really matters. So the analogy I would always tell folks, if you live in Wasilla and Mary Peltolo becomes governor, are you going to be okay with this policy if she charters the Rainbow Academy in downtown Wasilla and you pay for it through your property taxes? Right. So that's my question that I ask people. Like, you like the policy now because who the governor is and who's on the State Board of Education, but are you going to like the policy if they set up a transgender academy and your property taxes pay for that?
Right. Well, that's a good question. But doesn't that also raise the question of the conflict of interest of local school boards when, again, you have a lot of control from the local unions and interests where they don't want to see the competition. They don't want to have to compete in the marketplace of ideas in those local areas for those kind of things. I see your point. But again, the other side of that argument is we've got a lot of problem where local school districts don't want to see that competition, even though it's what the parents and the local taxpayers want.
Yeah. So but again, win your school board races, right? So that, like, we win school board races. We don't win all of them all the time in Fairbanks. And my heart goes out to the Anchorage folks. I don't know when the last time they've won a school board race is. But look, we know that all the polling or anyone you talk to, school choice is popular. It's bipartisan, right? So if you want to run for school board, run on that. So there are some financial incentives, Michael, with the current charter school system that create a perverse incentive for district wanting to have charter schools, right? So that's something that you can look at the legislative level, and you want to look to incentivize a district having a charter school, just like you incentivize districts having correspondence school programs. Okay, so what is that? I mean, most districts are going to argue that the 5% administrative cap that you put on a charter school system is basically not enough money or not enough grift for them to want to add charter schools, because they look at a charter school as losing their overall bottom line. And that's why they resist them very fiercely when they're budgetary constraints. Okay, so how do you fix that problem? I don't know how I'd feel about uncapping that percentage, because you don't want them to like grift for administrative positions and stuff like that. But you can create a financial mechanism to incentivize, the production of charter schools, if that's kind of the outcome that you want to get. But to me, that's the best way that you would do that on a legislative level. Like, you just create the proper financial incentive.
Speaking of financial incentives, let's ask the big question, the elephant in the room. And this is a question that you yourself have asked time and time again over the last 2 sessions. How do we pay for it all, Will? Because again, we had a big deficit this year. We're projected, according to the governor's 10-year forecast, to have $1.5 billion deficit, $1 billion to $1.5 billion deficit next year. And the EIA came out just last week with new projections showing that OPEC is accelerating the production increases, and they're expecting to have 2.2 million barrels per day more in production by the end of this year.
Mm-hmm.
And they're predicting that oil prices, that Brent crude prices, are going to fall into the mid 40s by the beginning of next year, which means Alaska crude will be in the low 50s to high 40s, which is going to exacerbate the problem even more. How do we pay for this? And we put this new BSA increase in, which has increased it's $184 million a year forever, and they're already making noises like, oh, we're going to do it again. They're coming back for more.
Well, I mean, again, I don't blame interest groups for lobbying for interest groups. That's just the very natural of the place. I'm not going to support more funding because there's no more money, right? So a couple of things. Remember, we budgeted $178 million the 3 previous years. So this is marginally more than we spent the last year. But the answer to your question, Michael, is really simple. You go and you brutalize the operating budget, right? How do you do that? I think the best thing that I have done on the budget so far is I was able to pass a budget amendment on zero-based budgeting. We talk about that all the time on the show. And by the way, I got Senate Finance is in their expertise and their staff to kind of agree with me and keep that amendment in the budget. And the governor came out with his executive order that says, hey, I'm going to get serious about efficiency. My argument about that is better late than never, but there is a ton of things in the operating budget. And like when I wrote my op-ed on the previous bill from a year ago, I said, look, if people are worried about long-term sustainability of funding this budgetary item, I am too, so go in and cut things, okay? I have gone through, I mean, I have bills to cut programs that no one's on. I have bills to cut inefficient programs that people are on. By the way, there are whole departments that are absolutely egregious with money. Corrections is a good example, right? The corrections budget is more than doubled in the last 7 years, and they have less prisoners than they had the year before. And unfortunately, we are going to have to make choices that people decided to make a long time ago that haven't worked out. So I'll give you an example on corrections. We decided that the moral thing in this state was to ensure that all of our prisoners were housed in the state. That has been an economic and financial disaster for the state, and we need to go back to making another decision, which is we need to go back to looking to outsource some of the prisoners in Alaska because the costs are astronomical, okay? And when you go through a line item budget on a zero base, you're going to see that. So I was hoping for one department to zero base their budget next year, but you're going to, I mean, if the governor can have the commissioners and the people who run the departments do zero base on a wider scale, I think that's great too. Because you, the voters and the people listening to this show, are going to see what I inherently know. You're going to see third-party contracts that are astronomical. You're going to see, day rates that are astronomical. You're going to see these inefficiencies that you're going to have to go through and cut, and they're going to be painful cuts. But look, we should do that anyways, and it's going to take the pressure and time in this system in order to realize that, right? And then, the best thing about that is you'll have absolutely, concrete evidence based on the justification of the expenditures for those types of actions.
Well, and I mean, this it's all well and good, and I love it, and I love the idea of zero-based budgeting. But we know that the push, and like you said, special interests are going to special interest. That's what they do. We know that there's going to be a push for another bite at this apple coming up, and you're saying there's no more money. So you are this is where you stop. This is your line in the sand. This $700 increase, and now we need to look at other parts of government. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I mean, in fairness, we've been looking at other parts of government the whole time. So I will say this is the first year I've been in the legislature that there were actual cuts to the operating budget. I don't, capital budget needs a little bit of work. There's some kind of kabuki there that have kind of wrecked a bunch of stuff in our STIP and capital budget. But I think people finally have an appetite to actually look at operating budget expenditures, because they know that there's fundamentally no where to go with the money, right? So, I mean, and I'm going to say credit to Senator Hoffman, right? I will tell you, Senator Hoffman led the charge in the Senate on making operational cuts to the budget. I mean, it's kind of sad when a Bethel Democrat has to inspire a bunch of Republicans to get serious about cutting the budget. But, I mean, I hope people get serious and know that there'll be difficult decisions. And just like I talked about my school board president, I mean, if they can do hard things, I can do hard things. And the state absolutely wastes a bunch of money. So.
The problem is we need to have the political will to do it. We talked about, I mean, the one thing that's continually been brought up is that we have upwards of 300 funded but unfilled positions in the state. Some of them have been unfilled for years. And there were amendments made to try and eliminate those positions. And you had Republicans and Democrats who were defending the use of those that have not been filled for years. And we're talking to the tunes of, 50, 70, $100 million in positions and monies that could go back into the coffers. But nobody wants to take that. Nobody wants to take a crack at that. How do you overcome that lack of political will?
Well, I mean, look, the alternative is other unpopular things like taxes and ending the PFD program. I mean, that's where you got to go. And the voters need to understand that, right? People need to understand that unless you get your operating budget under control, especially your programmatic increases under control, that you will go to industry taxes, or you will go to income and sales taxes, or you will basically have to eliminate the PFD program in order to fund these services.
Do you really think that the PFD program is going to continue? Quite honestly, I mean, we got $1,000 PFD this year, which, adjusting for inflation, is the lowest amount we've ever gotten. That's like $500 or $600 million spent on the PFD, and next year we're $1 billion in the hole. Do you really think we're going to get a PFD next year?
Well, that's going to depend on the voters of the state in the election, Michael. You know what I mean? Like, it's pretty clear. Like the coalitions, the people in the coalitions right now, I mean, they're going to spend out. I mean, look, they passed a DB bill in the state house. That's it. That's the end of your PFD, folks. Defined benefits. That's it. It's over, right? If the Senate passes that and becomes law, then whatever. Then when you go out and vote, if people say, "Look, I want to return all public employees to defined benefit," which you can. There's pros and cons of doing that, and you want to make sure that you try to treat it fair. But I mean, the financial risk of funded and unfunded liability is there, and that's where they're going to go for the money. So don't support candidates who say run on that as a platform, But if they do, then the voters are making a decision. You know what I mean? And that's unfortunate, but that's how elections go. But
do you predict that let's just say hypothetically, we get the same batch of people that we have in there now? Isn't it inevitable at that point that if the PFD goes away and the continual, and again, if you look at the 10-year forecast, it doesn't look any rosier beyond 2 or 3 years from now, especially with pricing of oil and everything else. Do you expect then we'll be looking at taxes? I mean, do you think that that's inevitable?
I think, all right. So you got a bit of a window, and like again, now you're going to see my optimistic side here because that's kind of my nature. Okay, so basically, you do have. Let's talk about positive. You have a renaissance on the North Slope. You have Willow, you have Pitka, you have Bill Armstrong doing exploration in Sockeye 2. So you've done a ton of capital investment on the North Slope, which is going to bring production levels to around 600,000 barrels a day in the mid to early 2030s. And there's also the beauty of the federal administration, which allows for a ton more capital investment on the slope, i.e. there's more pads that you can develop in the MPRA and in Willow project. There's more pads in Pitka. And again, if you get Sockeye 2, that would be close, if everything goes perfectly, I don't think it will, to nearly 1 million barrels a day. So the strategy here is to take a long-term view. So the issue that you talk about right now is people want to look at our industry taxes, especially on oil and gas, and they want to change them based on a money grab, okay? That is not how you want to do tax policy. You don't want to do tax policy on a money grab. Are there issues with MAPA? There are certain structural issues with MAPA that the legislature should absolutely look at changing on a fundamental level. However, when you devise a tax structure, you want to ensure two things. If you're somebody like me and you represent the interests of the state, you want to make sure it's fair and equitable for the state and the residents of the state as owners of the resource. But two, you also want to make that structure ironclad in terms of fundamental change to provide stability for industry to make a long-term investment, okay? So in my opinion, like the bills that we're looking at next session, especially around oil and gas taxation, they're just designed to take more money, okay? They're not designed to provide stability for industry. And if you pass those things, you're going to look, industry is going to continue to look at the state and said Alaska is not a reliable partner for a long-term investment. So we don't want to cut off our nose to spite our face. So when we look at things like that, we want to be methodical and structured in our approach.
We're going to continue here with Will Stapp. We're up against the break. We got more coming up. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio.
Listened to by more staffers in Juneau than any other show because their bosses told them to. And after what they just heard, oh man, they're going to be pissed.
You're a bad, bad man.
The Michael Duke Show.
Will Stapp is our guest here on the program. Will, you just talked about, Willow Pica, the new oil production, 600,000 barrels a day, et cetera, et cetera. But have you looked at the numbers to realize that, Brad Keithley has done some deep analysis on this, especially with the fact that some of these fields are outside of, are in federal lands and everything else. And even with a 600,000 barrel a day, the increase up to that, we're taking in less money than we are now. That's the problem. We have a quantity for sure, and the quantity could go up to 1 million barrels a day, but we're actually taking in less money in the long run. That's part of the problem with the tax structure that we have right now.
So this is the part where I kind of mentioned that there's certainly some, let's call it, maybe call it a feature. I would look at it as like a kind of a structural bug. So what's happening, Michael? What's happening is you're doing a ton of capital investment, and then that drives down the tax rate to basically, which is the 4%, which is gross minimum tax, and that's what they're paying for production tax. And they can carry those investment losses through multi-years, okay? So that structure, ultimately, if you push the years out far enough, the production has a maintained level and the state's going to get more revenue. But know that as they're making these investments, they get to amortize that cost by basically offsetting their taxes to the gross minimum until like 2035, 2036, right? So you do, in order to see the revenue increases, you got to push the chart out further when those deductions and credits roll off, okay? So now the question is is that the type of system should maintain or not? So those are the types of discussion that we're going to have. But you're not fundamentally wrong. You're going to see a spike in production. You're going to see a slight drop in revenue for a short amount of time as those lease expenditures kind of go through our tax structure. So
right. Well, but that leaves the question: can we survive the drop? See, that's the thing. We've got to survive a 10-year period of drop before we start to see things turn around. Can we survive those 10 years in the meanwhile?
Well, so that's this is why elections are going to matter, right? Because there are two things that I can tell you no, right? You will eat away all states' available revenue through programmatic increases and moving to potentially big liabilities like defined benefits, okay? And those liabilities will basically end up utilizing all the state's resources to a point where you'd have to end the dividend or you'd have to tax people, okay? So the question is like, how do you stay slow and steady, and how do you try to run the operate more? How do you try to operate your government as most efficiently as possible, so you can really capture the investment? Okay, so when I say the focus of the legislature and folks in the state needs to understand that with the Trump administration's regulatory policies and the oil renaissance on the slope, we have to maximize this opportunity until really the end of his presidency to get as much capital commitment and final investment decisions for projects as we can, okay? That is critical to the state's future. So if you take actions in this short window of the rest of the Trump presidency that is going to shake investor confidence, is going to have companies decide they don't want to make long-term investments in Alaska, you're going to kill our ability to have a positive future in the 2030s and 2040s, okay? So that's critical step number one. Now, to me, that doesn't mean you shouldn't have the conversation. You shouldn't start to work on what the most efficacy in tax structure is for oil and gas companies. But you got to understand the objective shouldn't be just taking more money from them. It should be to say, hey, what is a fair tax structure that that is stable and reliable and predictable long term, so I don't mess up my investment climate. The issue in Alaska has never really been this tax or ACEs or MAPA. It's the fact that we freaking change the tax structure every couple of years, Michael. That's not good for investment. You got to design a system. I'm a big fan of a gross tax system because I think it's less subject to change. You got to design a system and stick with it over time. Otherwise, you shake off investment confidence.
You mentioned defined benefits, and if they pass a defined benefits bill, there goes the PFD. I'm assuming you're not a fan of defined benefits. And
well, I gave a pretty epic floor speech, I think, on it earlier this year when I voted against it. But that's
no, I mean, I think people just want to make sure that you're not a fan of that.
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't say. Look, I do employee benefits for a living, right? So I actually like pensions. Okay, if everybody could have a pension, that would be great. Unfortunately, again, numbers don't lie. Okay, what is a pension? Basically, it is a guaranteed payment. In order to get a guaranteed payment, I have to have certain long-term financial calculations work out for me. That ultimately, you could have a pension if you're willing to spend more money. Okay, and like I said, it'd be exponentially more money, and this is state money. Okay, especially when you look at payroll growth and employer-employer match. So, like, pensions aren't a bad thing. Just know they cost money.
Yeah, and we know that past performance is indicative of future results, and we don't want more of what we had in the past to come back and bite us in the end. All right, we are continuing. Will Stapp is our guest. We're going to delve into the next session, what he sees coming on. How do we fix, the continual process? Do we get a fiscal plan and more? The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. We continue with Will Stapp right now. Please like and share, subscribe, ring the bell, do it all. Here we go right now.
Public enema number one. Oh, wait, sorry. Public enemy number one, which makes more sense. On the other hand, he's a little bit of a pain in the Michael Duke Show.
All right, we're continuing now. One final segment with Will Stapp, our guest on the program for today. All right, so we've gone over all the things, the education, why you voted to override. You're not supportive of more funding to education beyond this for now because we don't have the money. But the question is going to become, what does the next session look like? We have a structural financial problem in the state, and nobody seems to be willing to put forward a comprehensive fiscal plan to fix the problem in the state, which essentially is we continue to spend more money than we take in, and nobody wants to address that. But we're about to run out of road. We can't kick the can too much further down the road. We already know that they're coming back for more school funding. They've already said that. They've already made that moment. We've got the potential for defined benefits coming back as a point of pain. And of course, we've got our revenue problems that I alluded to earlier with the drop in the price of oil being predicted in Q1 of next year down into the high 40s. So how do we fix this fiscal situation, Will? I mean, do we have a fiscal plan? Do we get a comprehensive fiscal plan? Do we start cuts? What do we do?
Well, the first thing you need to do, Michael, is understand the chips on the table. Okay, who are the people that you're playing with, right? What are the people articulating things? Okay, so one of my favorite Michael Dukes episodes is when my friend Elise Galvin came on your show. Okay, the reason that was one of my favorite Michael Dukes episodes is because people all over the state got to hear a perspective that I hear all the time. So I'm going to tell you a story. So I carry the spending cap every year. I'm a big believer in constitutional spending cap, and trying to get 26 votes is always challenging in the state house and state senate. So one of the biggest concerns from some of my Democratic friends on the bill is they want to spend money and they don't like operating under a cap. So I offered an amendment to my own bill as a, let's call it, intellectual exercise. It was if you get enough votes, you can spend whatever you want on anything amendment. So you can, again, breach the cap with the 3/4 vote. Doesn't that sound great? And some of my Democratic friends, they said, this is the most amazing amendment to the spending cap bill. And then I said, it's actually a horrible idea because it defeats the purpose of a spending cap if you can spend whatever you want. Okay. So understand, going into next session, the reason I tell you that story is because ideologically, if you ask most of the Democrats or independents or whatever they call themselves nowadays, there's an exponentially high, probably infinite amount of money that they want to spend. And how they're going to get it is they're going to tax people, industry, income, sales, etc. Where they differ is some Democrats want taxes and the PFD, and other Democrats want no taxes want the taxes and no PFD. Okay, so that's really the only fundamental disagreement that you have. You say on your show all the time, that it's not right or left. It's like big government and small government. There are no small government Democrats, Michael. They don't exist. True. Otherwise, they wouldn't be Democrats, right? True. So this session, we're not going to see a whole lot of things happen, in my opinion. And the reason we're not going to see a whole lot of things is because people are playing for the 26 governor's race. Okay, I'll give you an example on defined benefits. Why would I work hard to pass a defined benefits this year when our current governor may or may not sign it, but a Democratic governor would sign it, and you could pass a way better defined benefits bill? You see what I mean? So the cards are far more beneficial if you can win the executive office on the third floor and keep these coalitions, all right? So in my opinion, the reason why we won't tackle a fiscal plan or anything controversial is because everybody who is kind of looking long-term, ideologically, they see the makeup and after to the 26th election, and they determine that the gains are much better if they get there than continuing to fight in this current year. So that's my opinion on what's going to happen, which is not that much.
No, I mean, and I agree. I think that's great analysis. I think that you're right. They're hoping that they can get a Democrat into the executive. And if so, then all their dreams will come true, which will mean, again, probably the death of the PFD and the institution of new taxes to continue the government spend. And you're right. There are no smaller government Democrats. My commentary on the big government versus small government was inclusive of all the Republicans that we see jumping onto these coalitions and doing all these things, because they're obviously not smaller government Republicans. And so really it has become, and we can go back all the way back into the teens and understand that it was the Republicans in the teens who set us up for this problem by spending 13, 14, $15 billion out of our savings to offset the cost of government instead of, reining in the size and scope of government at that point. So this has been an ongoing problem from that perspective.
Yeah, I mean, so just so people understand, like we tripled the operating budget in a decade. Okay, tripled it. That's kind of crazy if you think about that. You know.
It is, but I mean that's the nature of where we're going, and we expect that it's going to continue. But I think your analysis of them doing a hold up and wait kind of strategy is probably true. It doesn't mean that they won't continue to to ping the public and utilize this as a platform to say we need more funding, we need more funding. Nothing may actually go through, but they'll utilize the bully pulpit this whole time to try and convince people that this is more of what we need. Because you've seen the reaction, you've seen the news media complicity in perpetrating the whole idea of, well, we haven't funded schools, we haven't funded them, again ignoring it was one-time funding, but we funded the hell out of it.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, so again, numbers don't lie, people do. There's always been one-time funding in schools for pretty much every year that Alaska's had the foundation formula -1. I will say historically, by the way, when you give one-time funding, the state basically never pulls that away. It almost always becomes permanent if you look at the history of the foundation formula since 1999. And there's some fundamental issues with one-time funding. I'll tell you, like Fairbanks School District, with their one-time funding, they basically didn't allocate it how they were supposed to. They didn't give it to the charter school kids and homeschool kids, right? They just spent it on admin and stuff. I've never quite figured out how they could do that because it's supposed to mirror the formula. But I do know that, and I could pull up the argument or the article from the previous school board president who basically said, yeah, we're not going to spend this money how we're supposed to allocate it. And of course, now that it's in the formula, they have to spend it how it's supposed to be allocated. So.
Right. We're down to the last 90 seconds or so here, Will. I want to give you the final shot here and give us your final thoughts as we come into the next session. And folks who want to listen to what you have to say, give it to us.
Oh, yeah. So I guess the only thing I wanted to talk about that we didn't really talk about, it's always a pleasure to be on. Feel free to reach out and talk to me. I always come talk to folks, even my haters in the comments section. Don't worry, I'll talk to you guys too, But I would say the only thing I didn't really cover that I want to talk about is that permanent fund corporation consolidation, right, of the two types of funds. That'll be a big kind of chat and an issue this year. And I want to say just briefly, like my main position on that is I'm not going to support anything that allows the drawdown of the corpus. That doesn't mean you can't change the bill in a way that protects the corpus if you were to combine the funds, because there is some value in combining the funds. But just understand that the risk on that is always, it's not a permanent fund if you can take the corpus and draw it down. Okay?
Right, which has been our main drawdown here. The main drawback to this whole thing is that it gives them access to the seed corn, which would spell the death of the permanent fund in the long run, if that's the case. All right, Will Stapp, thank you so much. Hold the line for just a second. We appreciate you coming on. Thank you so much. Folks, we got to go. We're out of time. Tomorrow, Brad Keithley, Chris Story. We will continue the Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio. All right. We'll give you one final bite here, Will, if you want to finish up that thought on the
just on that topic, right? So I think structurally you'd have to sit down and work through the mechanics, Michael, but there is a value in combining the fund from an investment returns and efficiency standpoint, but that doesn't outweigh the risk of drawing down the corpus, right? So if you're going to do something like that, you got to have a methodical kind of protection mechanism from the legislature that's constitutionally protected from them basically not being able to spend down the corpus. Maybe you do that like a 5-year rolling average of the fund and you adjust the POMB rate, or maybe, I mean, kind of the lazy way of doing it is putting the draw at 4.5% or something, or 4. I'm not a fan of that because it doesn't actually protect the corpus. It's just kind of a lazy way of putting the drawdown. But you can mechanically, you can create it, you can design it so you won't be able to touch the corpus, right? So that'll be kind of the big debate going on next year.
Yeah, I mean, if this does go through, the only way that I would be happy, or be not happy, but I would be okay with it going through, would be if there was a mechanism to protect the corpus, because otherwise we're going to draw it down. We're just going to draw it down, and that's what's going to happen. It'll go away.
So then it goes back to just being a money grab, right? So like when I talked about oil and gas tax structure, I said, okay, well, you want to take all the conditions into the equation. You shouldn't just do it to grab money, right? So a lot of people, I think they want to combine the fund at a 5.5% draw just because they want to grab more money, right? So let's not do that.
Yeah. All right, Will. Well, I appreciate you coming on. We'll have you back on here in a few weeks as we get closer to the end of summer and the end of looking at the political season and everything. And we'll see what you have to say then. We appreciate you coming on, and hopefully we'll have you back soon.
Yep. Thanks, Michael.
All right, appreciate it. Thank you for coming on. All right, folks, that does it for me today. I gotta go. Stuff to do, people to see, get caught up from being off last week. Appreciate you guys coming on board. We look forward to seeing you guys tomorrow. Be kind. Love one another. Live well. The Michael Duke Show, Common Sense Radio.
We've shed our terrestrial radio skin, and now we are slimy lizard internet people. It's the Michael Duke Show.